What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir stock, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, May 29th. Alright guys, so Palantir here today, up 4 cents a share, big green day, plus 0.19% in regular trading hours, faded a few cents, about 8 cents here in the after hours. Listen, as always, after hours volume is going to be tremendously light, so take it with a grain of salt. I promise you, if you're on message boards, maybe our free Discord, and you're talking to someone about Palantir, you're going to see bears chanting the 8 cent downside move after hours. I don't care if it's up 15 cents. I don't care if it's down 10 cents. Look, guys, the volume is almost non-existent in the after hours. It is so weirdly easy to move stocks in the after hours with very small orders. You would be shocked. So take it with a grain of salt, but let's take a look at this name and try to pull out as much bias, both directional and, well, I suppose data bias, as we possibly can heading into tomorrow. And we will do that by starting with a volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, guys, if you're new here, by the way, first of all, welcome. Second of all, Palantir is a daily upload, so I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and I will keep the Palantir videos coming daily. Now, what we're doing here, guys, is peeling back the onion, looking under the hood, and trying to see, hey, you know, it's about a flat day, a small green day. Is there any bias that gives us more information about what actually happened today behind the scenes, maybe in this big dump off or this big recovery that we saw intraday? Is there any bias when we look under the hood? So let's do that. First of all, off the open, guys, if we compare this to last week, yes, it was higher volume off the open. Okay, but I'm noticing a trend. We saw that across quite a few stocks actually today. A bit of a sell-off off the open on a bit higher volume. And I've been assigning a small amount, maybe 10% bearish bias on that opening bar, just because it's a little higher than what is contextual volume on any normal day. Okay, but it was short-lived. The volume tanks off, right? And then we get into what is very normal volume for this time of day and basically mostly the remainder of the day. And we can start looking at the little changes that we see. So currently we have about 10% bearish bias off the open. Now, is there anything in the recovery? As the recovery picked up steam through here, probably the most aggressive bullish move of the entire day, we saw a bump in volume, and it sustained for about 3 bars and then tanked off as the red bars hit. Okay, that to me is probably about 15% bullish bias. So we're now leaning very slightly to the bullish bias side. As we move through the rest of the day, we have a couple of pops. It's not enough. It's only 2 bars. Someone could argue, hey, there's, 3-4% bearish bias. Fine. We move through here. That's essentially 1 bar, right? Because these are contextual. Essentially 1 bar. Then we head into the close. And a lot of people are going to look at this and say, oh man, that throws it in the bear's favor in terms of bias. Well, notice how it's very little movement and there's some wicks, right? It's not uncommon at all. We see this every day. To see rebalancing bars, at least the first bar after the bell, if not straddling the closing bell. We see higher volume. That's very normal, and I tend to ignore those because I think we kind of have to, whether they're red or green. So we leave the volume profile on Palantir today with what some might argue is kind of a wash. I would argue is probably a couple percent to the bullish side in terms of bias pulling out of the profile, which kind of matches up with the day, just a small green day, right? So honestly, that doesn't give us a whole lot more depth like we're used to getting out of the volume profile. So let's move on to something arguably much more simple to follow and highly, highly effective. The psychological, self-fulfilling prophecy levels, starting with the 30-minute chart. We have the 50 period, that white line, and the 200 period, that gray line. The most watched indicators you could possibly throw on a chart. That's why we care. Now, looking here compared to Friday, which is, of course, this day here in the middle, it looks like we gave up the 50 period today, but we did so in the after hours. Very low volume. The 50 period continues upside. The stock just kind of bounces around, fades a little bit. Right, remember the bears chanting, it's down 8 cents in the after hours. down 20% tomorrow, that kind of thing. Nothing, as far as the 30-minute is concerned, guys, very little changed here today. You can see it was sloppy. Don't get me wrong, this hold was much sloppier than Friday, but we held the 50 period into the close. No progress, but very little slipping up here today on the 30-minute. So tomorrow is kind of a repeat in terms of what we were looking for today from the weekend. Bulls, hold the 50 period as support. Okay, or use it as support, which means in terms of the after hours price, kind of getting back above and then holding as support. That would give us an opportunity to make a push up toward the 200 period and get above that, at least in the near term. Bears, use the 50 period as resistance as hard as you possibly can. That's the goal. Because you haven't really claimed it as such yet. We closed above it, right? We faded it after hours. You want to see an intraday test and a hard intraday high volume rejection. That's how you bears win this 30-minute tomorrow. Now, the 4-hour chart. You can see here that we are approximately 1.9% away from a retest of that 50 period. If we test it, really obvious. Bears, hold that as resistance. Bulls, get up through ideally and start treating that as support. That's really about it, though, here on the 4-hour. Anything else, we can do better on the daily. So let's not waste any time on the 4-hour, and let's go right to the daily. The story here on the daily is very similar to what we saw Friday, heading into today. You guys remember, the most recent story on Palantir has been the channel from 21 to 22. The whole dollar channel. Late last week, we gave up 21 to the downside. That wasn't fun. All right, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. It's like if the bears really get hold of this psychology on the daily, this could push below 20. Right, that was a concern. That was the next thing we were looking at. But we bounced back and barely held 21. And we barely held 21 here again today. Bulls, tomorrow. Hold 21 as support. Ideally start pushing deeper up into the 21 so we can start making a move back toward 22 to break out the top end of that channel. Bears, get below 21. Make it a more definitive test and hold as resistance. And that can help you guys push down toward 20, which I know so many of you are probably eyeing up. Now, implied volatility, obviously very important if you are trading options. You can see here up a little bit today, but in relation to the last week or compared to the last week, I would say we're about in the mid or about flat. Okay, IV is about flat in the last week. Compared to the last month, it's low. Okay, but understand we spent a big chunk of the last month in this same range. We just saw that big tank off after earnings, which we of course saw coming a mile away. But a month ago we were up here. Okay, so it is low in comparison to the last month. In comparison to the last few weeks, though, it's kind of flat. Compared to the last 3 months, it's low as well. Not the lowest, but it's low. Obviously important to understand all this, guys, because options buying typically should be done when IV is low with a strong directional bias that you have. Okay, buying options when IV is very high, there's a time and a place. Like if you think realized volatility is going to outpace expected volatility or implied volatility, right? But it's an unnecessary risk in most trades. I like to wait until I have a strong directional bias and IV is very low for buying options. Otherwise, if IV's flat or high, I'm typically selling options or using spreads. All right, now expected move here for tomorrow. We do not have the luxury of daily expirations on Palantir, though I wish we did. We will probably get that in the future, at least on the bigger blue chips. We'll see about Palantir, but listen, I'm talking like a decade. But we can do our educated guesswork, which is, of course, a huge part of trading anyway, to try to get tomorrow's expected move. So the expected move by Friday's close compared to today's close is plus or minus 64 cents per share. Here's what we do. Divide that by 3 trading days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Add back 50% to make up for the fact that initial calculation assumes all green or all red days. Silly assumption, we don't want that. Add back 50% to make up for that lost volatility. That gives us an expected move by tomorrow's close compared to today's close of plus or minus 32 cents a share. That's the approximate 1 standard deviation expectation being priced in by the market. And let's finish out here with directional bias. We had 170,000 total contracts traded today, 128,000 calls, and about 43,000 puts. Heavy call side bias on the overall ratio today. And if we break that down by short-term speculators, the 0 to 20 delta range, 55,000 calls, 12,000 puts. Low volume, take that with a grain of salt, but heavy call side bias out of the short-term speculators here today on Palantir. Listen, guys, hope to see you get grandfathered to the private community before the price goes up here. You can do so at the link in the pinned comment. If you appreciate the daily Palantir videos, please leave a like on the video and then get out of here and enjoy your day. That's all I ask. It's free and it helps out tremendously. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.